Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something that some people don't discuss enough, and then some people kind of take it to too far of an extreme, to the point where it's now a detriment to this same concept. But surprise, surprise, people in the lifting world, or particularly something like the bodybuilding world, take things to extremes. What? Who's ever heard of such a thing, right? Yeah. And that's the idea that more training is not always better. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about this from a coaching perspective. I'm talking about this from someone with a perspective of being very, very well versed in the scientific literature. I am not talking about overtraining per se. I'm not talking about overtraining. I'm talking about simply training beyond your recovery ability, overreaching, right? Overreaching without periods of recovery afterwards. So the reason it's not overtraining, this is a term that got way overused in, say, the bodybuilding world, which is not really my niche. I'm a power lifter, but I have coached a few bodybuilders and I have a lot of friends who bodybuild, and obviously a lot of people who follow the channel are bodybuilders. It's not my thing, although I do believe in maximizing muscle mass, and I think, we should avoid not being too fat. I think these are good things, irrespective of what your sport is. So there's going to be some overlap there. Now, that being said, the overtraining thing gets overused in a lot of magazines in the 80s and 90s from, say, the bodybuilding world really brought that into the lifting world, and they misused it. And it got misused so badly that early on, one of the other fitness YouTubers, back when I was new to this just over a decade ago, because I've been making videos online since 2012, and, he had got so into that he thought the magazine definition of overtraining was overtraining, and he started doing what he called overtraining and started calling it the overtraining system. And he tried to spin it as being a positive thing. And the reality is he was very ignorant regarding the science. All right. Overtraining is always a bad thing. Overtraining is something that sports physicians can diagnose in an athlete. It's a real thing. And when you are overtraining, literally overtraining, when you are in a chronically overreached condition, you don't just make slower gains, you lose gains. Okay, and I want to be clear on that. That's usually a sign, one of the signs of overtraining, when you start losing muscle and strength while still working out regularly. With no other explanation, you've been eating the same, sleeping the same, and all of a sudden your 300 bench press turns into a 220 bench press. Right? You go to put 250 on the bar and you get stapled. You used to hit 300 for a max or for a double, and now 250 you can't even lift it anymore. It just hits you in the chest and you can't push it off your chest. Okay? That's one of the signs of overtraining. You're losing muscle mass. Those are some of the signs. So it's not ever a good thing. Elevated resting heart rate, elevated blood pressure, intense muscle cramps that keep you up at night, insomnia. These sort of things combined together are the symptoms of overtraining. And it's a diagnosable. Like they can take you into the lab and tell if you're overtraining or not. There are medical signs of it that a sports physician can identify. That's not what we're talking about. Right? When I'm talking about sometimes training too much, you still can make gains. It's just not optimal. And what I always tell people, that 10 to 20 sets per week being that optimal zone, for most people, that is probably where your sweet spot's going to be. You're going to gain less muscle if you go under or over that number most of the time. Notice I didn't say every time. There are exceptions to every rule. So the thing is, that's what we're looking at. And when you look at a lot of the studies, that when certain ideal volumes are achieved, a lot of people are like, well, I want to do more just as an insurance policy. I want to make sure I'm working all of this stuff. Well, if you look at a lot of the research, that doesn't pan out too well. Only a very tiny number of studies have shown that when you start going to really high volumes, that it produces more muscle. And the ones that did, the results were questionable, have been heavily questioned by the experts, and it was such a small amount more that we were talking you need scientific equipment to even measure it. It's not like it's noticeably more, right? to the point, that is what the studies are showing, to the point where some of the people have looked at the numbers and said, hey, you guys did your math wrong, some other experts. Okay. They've looked at some of those and said that, no, they didn't actually gain more. Then you have studies that flat show they're the same, and you have studies that show that when you exceed certain volume thresholds, you lose muscle, like in terms of your gains, not from what you have now, but you might gain only half the muscle that you would have gained had you just done 20% less training per week. And it really is like that. It really is like that. In other words, when you're exceeding your recovery ability, you're compromising the muscle growth. And here's the other thing that people need to think about with that too. Even if you aren't losing anything from it, there's an opportunity cost to that. If you could gain X amount of muscle in X number of months by doing X amount of work, but you do double that work as an insurance, but you don't gain more muscle, what's happened there? I think it's very obvious what's happened. You wasted a lot of time. You've wasted a much higher risk of injury. You've created a bunch of fatigue and reduced your quality of life. Because when you're training beyond your recovery ability, you don't feel good. Okay, we should feel good. If we're physically fit and we don't feel good and feel healthy and energetic, there's a problem with your training. There's a problem with your recovery. And I'm saying this as someone who's 46. I don't have the problems my other old high school buddies have. Okay, I don't have the aches and pains, and I'm not as run down as them. I can tell you that much. Right? So recovery is probably more important than what you're doing in the gym. As long as your training is good enough. If your volume is good enough, you should be focusing on recovery. Because if anything, even if you could do more training, if you can't recover from it, it may have a negative effect. So I always tell people, spend less time worrying about how much you're going to do in the gym and need to be looking at, hey, what is going to be the workloads and volumes that are going to give me good results? Because as long as you're in that spot, you're going to continue to get better. And then you need to be spending the rest of your time worrying about what can I recover from it? How can I improve my recovery? How can I improve my recovery? Because even if you're in that optimal sweet spot for total work you're doing, but you spend more effort into recovery, that means better sleep, better nutrition, better stress management, right? Yes, stress management matters. And I know a lot of people are like, but the gym is my stress management. Well, you can't use that as your only tool. You need some others in there to help. I'm not saying it's not a good tool. It is. You could probably use some others. Layer them. Okay, whether it's meditations, hot bath, listening to music, whatever it is that you need to do. Unwind. Get more sleep. I can almost promise you that if you get another 30 minutes of sleep a night and you're anywhere near that optimal training volume range, you're probably going to gain a little more muscle out of it. Get that little bit of extra sleep. Can I get higher quality nutrition? Right? Higher quality foods in my diet. Right? More antioxidants, more vitamins, more minerals, more phytonutrients. Right? It's worth something in terms of that recovery. Put your efforts there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.